8 Hollywood mysteries that remain unsolved to this day. Hollywood is known as the place where your wildest dreams can come true. Where anything is possible if you just believe, work hard enough and have just enough luck. But most people don't know about the darker corners of Hollywood, the places that people don't like to talk about at parties. The places that are shrouded in dark mystery and unsolved cases. There have been many moments throughout Hollywood's history that remain unsolved and unexplained to this very day. Some are better known, some might shock and disturb you, and some might simply intrigue you. Let's start with 1. Who or what killed Virginia Rappe? In the summer of 1921, Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was on top of the world. Paramount Pictures had paid him an unprecedented $3 million, over 3 years, to star in 18 silent films, and he just signed another $1 million contract with the studio. The portly comedian's latest film, Crazy to Marry, was playing in theaters across the country. So his friend Fred Fishbach planned a big party to celebrate, a 3-day Labor Day bash at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. But by the end of the week, Fatty Arbuckle was sitting in cell number 12 on Felony Row at the San Francisco Hall of Justice, held without bail in the slaying of a 25-year-old actress named Virginia Rappe. Crazy to Marry was quickly pulled from theaters, and a nation was outraged to discover a sordid side to the off-screen lives of Hollywood stars. Behind Arbuckle's troubles was a mysterious woman named Maud Delmont, a witness for the prosecution who would never be called to testify, because police and prosecutors knew her story would not hold up on the stand. Yet what she had to say would be more than enough to ruin Arbuckle's career. The days leading up to the party did not put Arbuckle in the best of moods. He was in Los Angeles having his Pierce Arrow automobile serviced, when he sat down on an acid-soaked rag at the garage. The acid burned through his pants to his buttocks, causing second-degree burns. He was tempted to cancel the trip to San Francisco, but Fishbach would have none of it. He secured a rubber-padded ring for Arbuckle to sit on, and they made the drive up the coast to the St. Francis, where Fishbach had reserved adjoining rooms and a suite. According to Arbuckle, Fishbach arranged everything, from the rooms to the guests to the liquor, despite prohibition, and on Labor Day, September 5, 1921, Arbuckle awoke to find that he had many uninvited guests. He was still walking around in his pajamas, bathrobe and slippers, when he saw Delmont and Rappe and expressed concern that their reputations might alert police to the gin party. In Los Angeles, Delmont was known as a madam and blackmailer. Rappe had made something of a name for herself as a model, clothing designer, aspiring actress and party girl. But the food and booze were flowing by then, the music was playing, and Arbuckle was soon no longer focused on his exhausting work schedule, the burns on his backside, or just who all those guests were. What happened in the ensuing hours would play out on the front pages of William Randolph Hearst's national chain of newspapers, in lurid headlines, before Arbuckle had a chance to tell his side of the story. Maud Delmont soon painted a sinister portrait of the happy-go-lucky portly prince of silent film. This is what she told the police: after Arbuckle and Rappe had had a few drinks together, he pulled her actress into an adjoining room, saying, "I've waited for you 5 years, and now I've got you." After a half hour or so, Delmont heard Rappe screaming, so she knocked on and then kicked at the locked door. After a delay, Arbuckle came to the door in his pajamas, wearing Rappe's hat cocked at an angle and smiling his foolish screen smile. Behind him, Rappe was sprawled on the bed, moaning. Arbuckle did it, the actress said, according to Delmont. Rappe was taken to another room. A doctor was summoned, and he attended to her. She stayed at the hotel for a few days, before she was taken to a hospital, where she died, on September 9, of a ruptured bladder. The Hearst papers had a field day with the story. The publisher would later say the Fatty Arbuckle scandal sold more papers than the sinking of the Lusitania. While sexually assaulting Virginia Rappe, the papers surmised, the 266-pound star had ruptured her bladder. The San Francisco Examiner ran an editorial cartoon titled, "They Walked Into His Parlor," featuring Arbuckle in the middle of a giant spider web with 2 liquor bottles at hand and 7 women caught in the web. Rumors that he had committed sexual depravities began to swirl. Arbuckle turned himself in and was held for 3 weeks in jail. Police released a mugshot of the dejected actor, photographed in a suit and bow tie, his round face showing nothing of the joy everyone saw on celluloid. He remained silent as the innuendo swelled. Arbuckle's lawyers insisted he was innocent, and requested that the public make no judgment until all the facts were established. But they quickly realized Arbuckle would have to make a statement, and the comedian told a very different story from Maud Dale-Mont's. After having a few drinks with Virginia Rappe, the actress became hysterical, Arbuckle said. She complained she could not breathe and then started to tear off her clothes. At no time, Arbuckle insisted, was he alone with her, and he said he had witnesses to corroborate the point. He found Rappe in his bathroom, vomiting, and he and several other guests tried to revive her, from what they believed was intoxication. Eventually, they got her a room of her own where she could recover. Arbuckle was charged with manslaughter, and scheduled for trial that November. San Francisco District Attorney Matthew Brady saw the case as the perfect opportunity to jumpstart his career in politics, but he was beginning to have trouble with his star witness, Dale-Mont. Sometimes she claimed to be a lifelong friend of Rappe's, other times, she insisted they'd met just days before the party. She also had a criminal history of fraud and extortion, Brady discovered. Also known as Madam Black, Dale-Mont procured young women for parties where wealthy male guests soon found themselves accused of rape and blackmailed into paying Dale-Mont. Then there was the matter of the telegrams that she sent to attorneys in both San Diego and Los Angeles. We have Roscoe Arbuckle and a whole here chance to make some money out of him. Still, Brady proceeded to trial. The newspapers never questioned Dale-Mont's version of events, and they kept flogging Arbuckle. His reputation was in a shambles, even after his friends Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin vouched for his character. But Arbuckle's lawyers introduced medical evidence showing that Rappe had had a chronic bladder condition, and her autopsy concluded that there were no marks of violence on the body, no signs that the girl had been attacked in any way. The defense also had witnesses with damaging information about Rappe's past, but Arbuckle wouldn't let them testify, he said, out of respect for the dead. The doctor who treated Rappe at the hotel testified that she had told him Arbuckle did not try to sexually assault her, but the prosecutor got the point dismissed as hearsay. Arbuckle took the stand in his own defense, and the jurors voted 10-2 for acquittal. When the prosecution tried him a second time, the jury deadlocked again. It wasn't until the third trial, in March of 1922, that Arbuckle allowed his attorneys to call the witnesses who had known Rappe to the stand. He had little choice, his funds were depleted, he would spend more than $700,000 on his defense, and his career was presumed to be dead. They testified that Rappe had suffered previous abdominal attacks, drank heavily and often disrobed at parties after doing so, was promiscuous, and had an illegitimate daughter. One of them also attacked Maud Dale-Mont, as the complaining witness that never witnessed. On April 12, 1922, the jury acquitted Arbuckle of manslaughter after deliberating for just 5 minutes, 4 of which were used to prepare a statement. Acquittal is not enough for Roscoe Arbuckle. We feel that a great injustice has been done to him. There was not the slightest proof adduced to connect him in any way with the commission of a crime. He was manly throughout the case and told a straightforward story which we all believe. We wish him success and hope that the American people will take the judgment of 14 men and women that Roscoe Arbuckle is entirely innocent and free from all blame. 1 week later, Will Hayes, whom the motion picture industry hired as a censor to restore its image, banned Fatty Arbuckle from appearing on screen. Hayes would change his mind 8 months later, but the damage was done. Arbuckle changed his name to William B. Goodrich, Will Be Good, and worked behind the scenes, directing films for friends who remained loyal to him and barely earning a living in the only business he knew. A little more than 10 years later, on June 29, 1933, he had a heart attack and died in his hotel room. He was 46. 2. Suicide or cover-up? There is no doubt that Monroe had been depressed. She had always struggled against the demands of her stardom, and she relied on a regimen of psychiatric treatment and drugs to help her cope. She had recently been fired for constant lateness, from her latest film for 10th Century Fox, and her many marriages. Her high-profile husbands included baseball legend Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller, had all ended in divorce. She told Lawford drowsily, "Say goodbye to the president." On the evening of August 4, 1962, Marilyn Monroe telephoned Peter Lawford, the British actor who was also the husband of John F. Kennedy's sister, Pat. Monroe's voice was strangely slurred, and she ended their conversation ominously. "Say goodbye to Pat," she told Lawford drowsily. "Say goodbye to the president, and say goodbye to yourself because you're a nice guy." Hours later, the most enduring sex symbol ever to grace the American screen was found dead in her Los Angeles mansion, her graceful body lying face down and naked on her bed. Eunice Murray, Monroe's housekeeper, claimed that she noticed a light on in the bedroom around 3:30 a.m. Troubled, she called Monroe's psychologist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, and her personal physician, Dr. Hyman Engelberg. Greenson arrived around 3:40 and found Monroe's body. When Engelberg arrived a few minutes later, he pronounced her dead. The coroner's report subsequently listed the cause of her death as acute barbiturate poisoning, ingestion of overdose, and probable suicide. But the official version of Monroe's death fails to account for the discrepancies that might indicate murder. Many of the most prominent witnesses involved with the case later cast doubt on their original reports. Some alleged that they were forced to participate in a cover-up, and have implied that the cover-up was designed to protect President Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Speculation that Monroe had had an affair with the president had been rampant since May 1962, when Monroe performed a seductive happy birthday number for him, singing to the president in front of a crowd of 20,000 people, at Madison Square Garden. It is now known that Monroe and the president were among overnight guests at Bing Crosby's house in Palm Springs on the same evening, and met on several other occasions. I might just call a press conference and tell them all about it. It is also speculated that Monroe was involved in an even longer-term affair with Robert Kennedy, the president's brother, who may have been trying to distract Monroe from a mutually damaging relationship with the president. Conspiracy theories abound about the Kennedy connection and Monroe's death. Could she have been killed to prevent her from going public with her relationships with the two leading members of the most prominent political family in America? Was Robert trying to end his affair with Marilyn at the time of her death? A few days before her death, Monroe purportedly told the writer Robert Slatzer that if Bobby continued to avoid her, I might just call a press conference and tell them all about it. In his biography of the deceased star, Slatzer alleged that Bobby had actually visited Monroe on the day she died, and spent the night at the home of his brother-in-law Peter Lawford. But who really knows the truth? Seymour Hersh, while writing the biography The Dark Side of Camelot, uncovered documents proposing that Bobby had set up a trust fund for Monroe's mother, supposedly to buy Monroe's silence, but after further investigation, the documents were found to be false. Monroe's death has also long been tied to the Mafia, who had a long and adversarial relationship with the Kennedys. They may have struck out at her to get back at John and Bobby. There exists evidence that in the months before her death, Monroe's phone was tapped by both the Justice Department of Robert Kennedy and the agents of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters boss Jimmy Hoffa. Was Monroe really a pawn caught between the country's most powerful criminals and politicians? No one knows, but the medical explanation for her death is full of holes. The suicide investigation reported that Monroe swallowed one gulp of around 47 Nembutal pills, but her prescription, given to her by Dr. Engelberg, was for only 25 pills. If Monroe had killed herself by swallowing the pills, the residue from their digestion should have been found in her stomach. They were not. It has been speculated that Monroe died of an injected overdose of drugs, but she had no access to injection barbiturates. The injection would have had to come from another source. The coroner's report said that there were no puncture marks on Monroe's body, but Dr. Engelberg's bill to her estate showed he had given her an injection the day before her death. That mark should have been clearly visible. Was Marilyn Monroe administered a homicidal injection which the coroner's report covered up? The answer may never be known. But given Marilyn's complicated connections with so many men in positions of power, a cloud of suspicion may always hang over the events of that August night. 3. Missing or hiding out? More than a decade after his mysterious disappearance, investigators claim the former partner of Olivia Newton-John has been found alive and well in rural Mexico, where he lives with his new girlfriend. Former cameraman Patrick McDermott and the Australian star had been dating for 9 years, when he vanished in June 2005, while on an overnight fishing trip off the coast of San Pedro, California. The Coast Guard launched an exhaustive search of the area in hopes of finding his body, but had no luck and in November 2008, declared McDermott most likely drowned. 2 months later, investigators revealed that McDermott had faked his own disappearance, and was alive and well in Mexico. Weekly magazine Woman's Day claims that fresh evidence confirms previous reports, that McDermott is living in Mexico, having settled down with a European girlfriend. Investigator John Nazarian told the publication, "It's rumored he was with a German national. I spoke to people there. The girl he was traveling with was described as having a German accent." He then added, to come up with a conclusion that he fell off the boat, and allegedly no one saw him fall off the boat, is the most preposterous thing I've ever heard in my life. McDermott was 48 at the time he went missing from the fishing boat Freedom, which had set off from San Pedro Marina for a fishing expedition on June 30, 2005. None of the 22 passengers saw McDermott go overboard during the trip, and he was not reported missing until a week later, when Newton-John contacted authorities after he failed to show up for a family gathering. Newton-John had been in the middle of a promotional tour in Australia, when McDermott vanished from the boat, which is why it took her so long to realize he had gone missing. Investigators also revealed that McDermott disappeared shortly after filing for bankruptcy, having unpaid debts totaling more than $30,000 at the time. Among these debts was $8,000 in child support owed to his ex-wife Yvette Nippar for their son, Chance. The investigators also discovered that McDermott, who is of Korean descent, secured a second passport in his birth name Patrick Kim and withdrew life savings from 2 bank accounts just before vanishing. Newton-John's report that McDermott was missing prompted a furious search of the California coast in the weeks after, with officials having no luck in finding any clues as to what happened at sea. The complete lack of eyewitnesses at the time McDermott went over, also made it difficult to determine if the incident was a suicide or accidental death. In the end, both theories proved to be false. A separate investigation into McDermott's disappearance was launched by Texas-based private investigator Philip Klein in 2009, with his findings later revealed in a 2010 episode of Dateline. Klein also wrote a book in 2012 that detailed his findings, Lost at Sea: The Hunt for Patrick McDermott. It was just weeks into Klein's investigation in February 2009, that an individual writing on behalf of McDermott faxed a letter confirming he was alive, and asking that he be left alone. It reportedly said, "Pat has asked that I portray to you his innocence. Pat has committed no crime. Pat simply wishes to be left alone. Let him live his life in peace and harmony. He is safe and has started anew again in a new place both physically and mentally. Stop this search immediately." Klein then worked to prove the letter's authenticity, and deemed it to be credible a few months later in April of that year. He later revealed that he had also been in communication with McDermott's lawyer, saying at a press conference, his attorney called from Mexico City and said that Patrick didn't want to be bothered. He hadn't faked anything. He just wanted to get away from the drama. The letter confirming that McDermott was alive came as Klein had begun his research on the ground in Mexico, which ultimately resulted in over 20 sightings of the missing man in Central America. Klein also claimed to have tracked him to the remote town Sayulita, a favorite with drifters, where he worked as a deckhand. He made this discovery after noticing that IP addresses in this area frequently logged onto a website that was created by investigators to track McDermott's whereabouts. One person who does not believe that McDermott is alive however is his former wife Nippar. The actress, who has appeared on shows including Melrose Place, 21 Jump Street and CSI Miami, married McDermott in March 1992, with the pair getting a divorce soon after in June 1993, while Nippar was pregnant with their son. Given the brief marriage and the fact that her ex owed her thousands of dollars at the time he died, it was a bit of a surprise when it was revealed in 2012, that Nippar had personally written Amazon's Jeff Bezos demanding that he stop promoting Klein's book about her husband. She labeled Klein a serial liar in her letter, while also pleading with the billionaire to think about her child. "My son has been through enough emotional torment over this. He has yet to be able to move on due to Mr. Klein's continual effort to keep him in the public eye," wrote Nippar. McDermott's death did provide one silver lining for his son however in the form of his $100,000 life insurance policy, which Chance was the sole beneficiary of at the time. It has never been revealed if Chance received the money immediately, After the disappearance, his father had to wait until 2008, when McDermott was declared likely drowned by the Coast Guard. Unlike Nippon, Newton-John has not shared her feelings on McDermott's disappearance or eventually discovery, refusing to comment on the situation. She has also refused to speculate on whether her ex is living or dead, though she did respond to the possibility he could be alive in an interview 1 year after he went missing by saying, "We'd be thrilled if it was true." At the time, that theory was based on the fact that the Coast Guard had yet to find his body, and was 3 years before investigators first released their findings about McDermott's new life in Mexico. She has since gone on to find love again, marrying John Easterling, the founder and president of natural remedy firm Amazon Herb Company, in 2008. The pair exchanged vows during a private Incan ceremony in Peru, only telling Newton-John's daughter Chloe Lazzini about the nuptials. Shortly after she sold the home in Malibu, California she had lived in with McDermott during their relationship. She remains close with Nippon, however, who posted a throwback photo of the two together taken after McDermott's disappearance on her Instagram account last year. In the caption, she called Newton-John #friend for life. Daily Mail Australia have contacted Olivia Newton-John, John Nazarian and Philip Klein's representatives for further comment. 4. Woman overboard. Novel technique props up at least half this Natalie Wood biopic, by having associates and friends offer testimonials to her state of mind, in alternately closeted and carefree ways, and with actual news footage added. Director Peter Bogdanovich has found a way to develop a level of realism not usually found in based on a life telepics. A novel technique props up at least half this Natalie Wood biopic, by having associates and friends offer testimonials to her state of mind, in alternately closeted and carefree ways, and with actual news footage added. Director Peter Bogdanovich has found a way to develop a level of realism not usually found in based on a life telepics. Free of humor or ambiguity, The Mystery of Natalie Wood is more a story about a woman's search for love rather than about fame and its trappings. Best moments are all early on, as Wood, Elizabeth Rice and Justine Waddell, sorts out her place in Hollywood, school and family, leaving the adult years to flash by riddled with cliches. There's actually little mystery in Elizabeth Egloff's script for The Mystery of Natalie Wood. Wood is the product of a myopic stage mother who ultimately causes mental and physical pain while forcing Natalie, born Natasha Zakrenko, to grow up in front of the cameras from age 5 on. Mom, Maria Gurdon, Alice Craig, is psychotically overbearing and demanding. She shuts out other family members in the name of getting Natalie's star to rise. "God made her," she tells a reporter in a rare moment she isn't lording over Natalie. "I invented her." Mystery focuses, almost excessively, on Gurdon's warnings to her daughter, she'll either die during childbirth or drown. She feels her control is limited. To get a stronghold, she isolates Natalie from the world around her. Lacking parental love as she gains success within the studio system, Wood sets out to romantically link with men and boys with whom her parents would disapprove. As a 14-year-old, Wood wants out of Hollywood. A year later, she's committed to acting, and demanding that mom accept a no-butting-in policy. She essentially races into adulthood, dating men in their late 20s, when she's barely driving age. Directors come on to her, an actor rapes her, and still her mother persists in attempting to get her to go to places such as Frank Sinatra's house, rather than hang out with her peers, whether they be actors or high school students. At 19, she marries 27-year-old Robert Wagner, Michael Weatherly, and the fairy tale quickly comes to an end. Mystery focuses on the drinking, pill-popping and unhappiness, a life detailed in moorland dialogue, as Oscar noms and artistic achievement in films such as Splendor and The Grass are little more than a background scrim. Once they divorce, Wood ricochets from one relationship to another, some casual, some committed, with the likes of Warren Beatty, Matthew Settle, and Henry Jaglom, Rupert Reed. Another marriage and divorce leaves her with children, her mother still in tow. Wagner re-enters her life, and a wealth of acting possibilities start appearing. Pick should have a happy ending, but Wagner's jealousy does him in as much as the drinking. Waddell graces her depiction of Wood with an enticing sexiness, and a shaded vulnerability, two qualities Wood exuded in films such as Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story. Filmmakers are, however, in not aging Waddell, Real-life stills and footage of the mid to late 70s are quite the contrast to Waddell, who still appears to be a 24-year-old starlet. Weatherly isn't asked to do much more than stare into his drink and battle with Wood, a scene on this side of the road when he regrets ever leaving her as ridiculously over the top. Cryge, as the mother, is stuck on a single note for 3 hours. But Bogdanovich's direction ultimately saves mystery. The flow of the story and framing of scenes are consistently enticing, no matter how syrupy the dialogue becomes. 5. Mother or Daughter? On April 4, 1958, Johnny Stompanato, a gangland killer so glamorous his nickname was Handsome Harry, died from a surprise knife attack at the home of his girlfriend, aging Hollywood superstar Lana Turner. The ex-Marine had survived frontline combat in World War II and, later, as the chief bodyguard and enforcer for crime kingpin Mickey Cohen, he routinely ran up against the mob's most homicidal heavies. Now Stompanato lay lifeless on the carpet. He was 32. They wouldn't be calling him Handsome Harry anymore. Irony of ironies, it happened on Good Friday. So who finally took the Tinseltown tough guy down? A 14-year-old girl, that's who. Cheryl Crane, Lana Turner's daughter, who'd been privy to many occasions on which Stompanato beat, threatened, or otherwise tormented her mom. Crane decided to make this the last one. A stormy and, not surprisingly, violent path led to this ultimate confrontation. After being famously discovered at 19 as Hollywood's premier sweater girl inside Schwab's drugstore, Lana Turner spent the 1940s as the toast of the silver screen, a blonde bombshell with brilliant acting abilities, to boot. As happens, though, time tarnished Turner's youthful appeal, and like too many others, she turned to heavy drinking and long run of lousy relationships that, after 5 failed marriages, brought her to Stompanato. The man Turner initially knew as Johnny Steele was strikingly good-looking, muscularly strong, and 5 years her junior. What's not to love, for a fading starlet? Unfortunately, Stompanato was also a bottom-feeding thug, who had himself burned through 3 marriages, 2 of which were to Hollywood actresses, and he regularly got pinched by the LAPD on scuzzy charges such as vagrancy and suspicion of robbery. So by the time Stompanato, who was also known as Johnny Stomp and Oscar, hooked up with Turner, his glory days loomed behind him, too. It'd been had a long time since 1948, when Frank Sinatra asked Mickey Cohen to keep Stompanato away from his beloved David Gardner, to which the mob boss replied that he never got between his men and the broads. The Turner-Stompanato combination proved toxic fast, and hit one historically insane low in 1957. Turner was in England filming Another Time, Another Place with Sean Connery when Stompanato flew over and confronted her on the set. Johnny Stomp whipped out a pistol and warned Connery to stay away from his woman. In a flash, the 6'2", 27-year-old Connery, fresh from his previous careers as an amateur boxer and professional bodybuilder, grabbed Stompanato's wrist and twisted it until the gangster dropped his piece. Security guards then escorted the humiliated thug out, and British authorities promptly deported him on drug charges. Connery would later worry about mafia retaliation for the act. Turner would actually suffer retaliation from Stompanato once she got back home, in the form of domestic violence. Stompanato's abuse grew increasingly severe. Finally, on April 4, Turner reportedly told Crane, "I'm going to end it with him tonight, baby. It's going to be a rough night. Are you prepared for it?" Obviously, Crane took those words to heart. That evening, Crane heard Stompanato rant about carving up and killing her mother. She fetched her own knife from the kitchen. From there, Crane has always maintained she blacked out, and can't remember what happened once she threw open the door, other than that Stompanato seemed to walk into her knife. The blade pierced his abdomen, liver, aorta, and a portal vein. He bled out on the spot. In the whirlwind aftermath of the killing, California authorities took custody of Crane, and made her a ward of the state, while the case got sorted out. A week later, Lana Turner testified at a coroner's inquest as to what went down, stating, "Stompanato grabbed me by the arms, and started shaking me and cursing me very badly, and saying I would have to do anything and everything he told me, or he'd cut my face or cripple me. And, He would kill me and my daughter and my mother. I was walking toward the bedroom door, and he was right behind me, and I opened it and my daughter came in. I swear it was so fast, I truthfully thought she had hit him in the stomach. The best I can remember, they came together and they parted. I still never saw a blade. Shortly thereafter, the 12-member coroner's inquest panel ruled the killing a justifiable homicide, and Cheryl Crane returned home. Other theories got tongues wagging. Among them was that Crane was in love with Stompanato and jealous of her mother, or that Turner stabbed Stompanato herself, and got Crane to take the rap because she knew a kid could beat it. None of that ever amounted to anything. Lana Turner continued acting, albeit less frequently and often in lower-profile productions, until she retired in 1985. She died at 74, 10 years later. Cheryl Crane had a tougher road to hoe than just that. After being placed in a boarding school for psychiatric examination, and repeatedly running away, Crane turned to alcohol and drugs early on. Ultimately, she attempted to kill herself twice. In 1988, Crane broke her silence by publishing the memoir, Detour, A Hollywood Tragedy, My Life with Lana Turner, My Mother. Crane alleged in the book that Stompanato had sexually abused her, as had Lex Barker, a second-tier Tarzan actor who was Turner's fourth husband. Crane stated that Barker's assaults were repeated and extreme. Barker died in 1973, and thus could not respond to the claims. In addition, Crane came out as a lesbian, and Turner said she considered Joyce Leroy, Cheryl's partner, to be a second daughter. Crane has reportedly been clean and sober for decades. She and Leroy have been together for more than 40 years. 6. Tupac v. Big. The unsolved murders of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls are undoubtedly two of the biggest mysteries in hip-hop and pop culture. The vicious rivalry between the East and West Coast rappers came to an end with the drive-by shooting of Tupac Shakur in 1996, and the shooting of the notorious Big aka Biggie Smalls, who died in similar circumstances in 1997. With no strong leads or suspects over the last 2 decades, fans and conspiracy theorists have run wild with their own suspicions on who killed the two most iconic figures in rap history. Hip-hop mogul, Biggie's best friend, and Bad Boy Records label boss P. Diddy has found himself to be at the center of the latest theory. In the documentary Murder Rap, former Los Angeles police detective Greg Kading, who published a book in 2011 of the same name, alleges that Diddy, real name Sean Combs, paid a member of the Crips gang to kill Shakur, and Death Row Records boss Suge Knight, who escaped the shooting unharmed. This is just one of the many theories out there on the murders that shook hip-hop. So from the outrageous to the most popular, IB Times UK takes a look back at the biggest theories on who killed Tupac and Biggie. The former detective involved in the investigation of Biggie's murder claimed to have discovered that several members of the LAPD also worked as security for Death Row Records and were dirty police officers. According to Poole, these officers conspired to cover up the fact Suge Knight was behind Biggie's murder. The ex-LAPD detective said in Nick Broomfield's 2002 documentary, Tupac and Biggie, "You got to think to yourself, who could do this and get away with it? Cops." Author John Potash explored this theory of Tupac's death in his book The FBI War on Tupac and Black Leaders, which took 12 years of research. According to Potash, Tupac was being monitored by the Federal Bureau due to his ties with the Black Panther Party. Explaining his idea behind the theory to all hip-hop, Potash said, he had very close relationships with his extended Black Panther Party family, who acted as his mentors, not to mention that he was trying to do more positive things. The government orchestrated his assassination. In an explosive piece published by the Los Angeles Times, a reporter alleged that Biggie offered gang members $1 million to shoot his rival Tupac, and even lent his own gun to carry out the murder. However, this theory has been widely discredited over the years. According to Tupac's former bodyguard Frank Alexander, Crips affiliate Orlando Anderson orchestrated the rapper's murder after the pair got into a fight in Las Vegas. In an interview, Alexander said, "On the night of the Tyson Seldon fight, a friend of Suge Knight's came up to Tupac and whispered that he had spotted Orlando Anderson in the arena. Tupac ran over and that's when they got into it. I ran over and saw Tupac throw a couple of blows. Anderson tried to throw one back, but ended up going down, and that's when a ton of death row guys jumped on him. If you get into a scuffle and you get your butt whooped, what you gonna do? You're going to tell your friends, "Hey, I just got into a fight and guess who it was with? Tupac." And someone's going to say, "You know what, let's go get some payback." I can see that happen. 7. Phil Hartman. The families of comic actor Phil Hartman and his wife today offered a united front, saying they were one with incalculable sorrow. Police believe the former Bryn Amdahl, 40, shot the news radio star, 49, several times in the head as he lay in his bed in boxers and a t-shirt, then turned a gun on herself Thursday morning. Authorities have yet to determine a motive. "Our sadness is beyond words, and beyond understanding," the Hartman and Amdahl families said, in a statement. The release called the couple's 2 children the innocent victims, and labeled media accounts of the apparent murder-suicide as full of unbridled speculations. Phil and Bryn were a loving couple, devoted to each other and their children, the statement said. This tragedy is not indicative of who she was, or who they were together. But even as the families sought to quash speculation, friends of the Hollywood couple were weighing in with their opinions. Attorney Steve Small, who handled Phil's 2 previous divorces, told the Los Angeles Times that Bryn had a temper. She had trouble controlling her anger. She got attention by losing her temper, Small said, in the newspaper. Phil said he had to restrain her at times. Today's New York Post quoted an unnamed NBC publicist as saying that Bryn may have snapped because the ex-Saturday Night Live star told her he wanted out of their 10-year marriage. It looks like a case of she couldn't stand the thought of losing him, and if she couldn't have him, nobody could, the network source told the News Tab. And neighbor Stuart Kramer told the Post of the Hartmans, "It didn't seem like a normal, happy house. There wasn't a family coming from that house. You never saw them together." Bryn bought a gun 6 years ago when she and her family moved from New York to Los Angeles, a friend of the woman told the Times. "I begged her to get rid of the weapons," the source said in the paper. "But she didn't feel safe in this house." Other accounts painted a far less troubling domestic picture. "She was fine, like a normal person," said the manager of an Italian restaurant where Bryn met a friend for drinks on Wednesday night, in USA Today. "She seemed fine to me." Tim Stack, who worked with Phil at the Los Angeles comedy troupe, The Groundlings, said he lunched with the actor 2 weeks ago. If there were trouble on the marriage front, Phil didn't discuss them, Stack told the Times. "In fact, that was the weird thing," Stack said, in the newspaper. "He had such great affection for Bryn. He said, 'This is the one that's for real.' The crazy years were behind him." And Phil's sister, Nancy Hartman McCoy, said even the family saw no warning signs. "My mother was up there visiting with them, as a matter of fact, last week. And she had a wonderful visit with them both," Hartman McCoy said, in USA Today. The 2 Hartman children, Sean, 9, and Bergen, 6, were said to be in the custody of relatives, although it's unclear which relatives. In other related news, funeral services for the couple will be private, the Hartman and Amdahl families said. Plans were pending. NBC was withholding comment on the future of news radio. The low-rated ensemble comedy, featuring Hartman as pompous anchor Bill McNeil, was recently renewed for a 4th season. Production was expected to begin later this summer. Also, no word on how the makers of Third Rock from the Sun intended to deal with the actor's sudden loss. The season-ending cliffhanger for that fellow NBC sitcom involved guest star Hartman kidnapping the alien character played by French Stewart. At The Simpsons, another TV show where the versatile performer often worked, Hartman's voice will be heard one last time come the new season. He recently recorded a script for a Halloween episode. 8. Thelma Todd. If Thelma had indeed walked to the garage from the spot where her driver dropped her off, it would have been quite a hike. For most people, walking from the garage to their home only takes a matter of seconds, but this was not an average situation. The garage where Thelma's car was stored was quite a distance from her apartment. For Thelma to get to the garage, she would have either had to climb over 270 stairs, or walk through some dark streets through a very hilly area. In either case, it was hardly a little stroll, and her shoes surely would have gotten dirty and damaged in the process. But when her body was found, The wear and tear on her shoes simply wasn't consistent with having walked that sort of distance. During the investigation into her death, an officer with a similar build tried making the walk in comparable shoes, and her shoes were much dirtier than Thelma's. Thelma's feet were also clean and her stockings were undamaged, so she certainly didn't try walking without her shoes. Since the walk to the garage would have been so difficult, some people doubt that Thelma could have even made the walk. She wasn't known for being a fan of exercise and particularly wasn't fond of walking due to some old ankle injuries. After all, the entire reason why Thelma and May had their system of May picking up Thelma's Phaeton and bringing it to the restaurant for her each morning was to spare Thelma from making that walk every day. During the investigation after her death, investigators had jurors make the walk involved in this theory, and it was a very challenging walk even for jurors who were more accustomed to exercise. It's also questionable whether or not she was even locked out, since her key was found in her handbag. Even if she had gotten locked out, there's one rather large problem with this theory: she never trekked to the garage when she got locked out before. Instead, she simply broke a window to get the attention of Roland West to let her in. Theory 2. Suicide. If Thelma Todd didn't die accidentally, could it have been a suicide? After all, if it's believable that she knew the risks of carbon monoxide poisoning, could she have done herself in? Not long before her death, she'd been receiving strange threatening letters. Near the end of the party, she received an upsetting message from an unknown person. She also had an encounter with her ex-husband at the party which, by some accounts, was not entirely pleasant. The chauffeur who drove her home that night said Thelma was unusually quiet, and told him not to escort her to the door as he usually did. Despite the fact that suicide also seems like a very simple explanation, it seems to be the theory that's most quickly dismissed. According to her friends, all of her behavior indicated that she was looking forward to the future. Her film career was hardly over and she had just signed a new contract with Hal Roach. She was excited about her restaurant, and the trunk of her car was full of Christmas presents for her friends and family. Some of her close friends like Ida Lupino and Zasu Pitts stated that she had been raving about a mysterious new man in her life from San Francisco, although none of them knew who he was. Guests at the Trocadero party said she was in very good spirits that night. At least she was in a lovely mood until about 1:50 a.m., when she received that upsetting message. By all accounts, she hardly seemed to be on the verge of ending it all. Theory 3. Murder. If Thelma Todd's death wasn't accidental or a suicide, that leaves either murder or natural causes. Although there was some initial speculation that she may have died of a heart attack, the medical examiner pretty definitively linked the cause of death to carbon monoxide poisoning. With natural causes off the table, that leaves a murder. But officers found no signs of a struggle or robbery in the garage. Thelma was found wearing all the expensive jewelry she had worn to the party, and there weren't any signs of injury, aside from a small amount of blood which is believed to have come from her lip when her head hit the steering wheel. With no sign of a struggle, how did murder become such a popular theory? The possibility of murder came into the picture almost immediately, when Thelma's mother Alice arrived at the garage on the morning of December 16th, and stated that her daughter had been murdered. However, she later changed her story and said Thelma's death was accidental. But over 80 years later, murder is still a very strong possibility. There's some evidence to suggest that Thelma may have gone somewhere else between the time her chauffeur dropped her off at home and the time her maid discovered her body on the morning of December 16th. During the autopsy, the medical examiner found that she had undigested peas in her stomach, and a blood alcohol level of 0.13 at the time of death. Although Thelma had a couple of drinks at the party, by all accounts, it wasn't enough to get her drunk. But the coroner who examined Thelma said that kind of blood alcohol level would have stupefied her. Also, nobody at the party remembered seeing her eat peas that evening, but during the autopsy, the medical examiner found that the peas in her stomach had only just started to be digested at the time of death, which throws off the theory that she died between the hours of 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock a.m. on December 15th. Could Thelma have gone someplace else where she was served peas and more drinks? If someone had picked her up and taken her out again, it could explain how she ended up in the garage with neat hair and shoes. The idea that Thelma went someplace else after being dropped off at home could also explain some of the encounters with her that reportedly happened on December 15th. On December 15, Thelma was set to attend a party thrown by Martha Ford, wife of Wallace Ford. According to Martha, she received a phone call from a person she believed to be Thelma, saying she'd be arriving at the party soon with a surprise guest. Thelma never made it to the party. Could Martha have been mistaken about the identity of her caller? Jewel Carmen, Roland West's estranged wife, told police she had seen Thelma in the passenger seat of a car being driven by an unknown man, but her claims are highly questionable since she said Thelma was wearing a hat when she saw her, but no hat was found when her body was discovered in the garage. Although Thelma was a very well-liked woman, sadly, we can't say she was universally loved. Not long before her death, she was receiving those threatening anonymous messages. The person responsible for those had been arrested, and was imprisoned at the time of her death. In fact, her chauffeur stated that in the past, she'd asked him to drive as quickly as possible because she was worried about kidnapping attempts. The fact that Thelma had a restaurant which attracted many celebrity visitors, also made her a target for gangsters hoping to set up an illegal casino in her restaurant, something she adamantly did not want any part of. So, who could have had it out for her? The most popular, and most sensational, theory is that the notorious Lucky Luciano is responsible for Thelma's demise. Around the time of her death, Luciano was operating out of Los Angeles, trying to gain a foothold in Hollywood's illegal gambling syndicate. Certainly, Thelma Todd's restaurant would have been a prime location for him to set up shop. Thelma's ex-husband Paddy Sicko had mob ties, so it's certainly plausible that she might have crossed paths with Luciano at some point. Supposedly, Thelma had dinner with Luciano at one point, during which he brought up the gambling and Thelma was overheard firmly telling him no before storming off. Could he have put a hit out on her, carried out in a way that involved picking her up and taking her out to eat before putting her in the garage? After Thelma's death, Luciano abruptly left Los Angeles and never returned. Lucky Luciano is hardly the only suspect in her death, though. Roland West later tried to claim he was responsible for her death, but there's a lot of doubt about that since his version of the events leading up to the discovery of her body are riddled with inconsistencies and contradictions. But many of Thelma's friends had reason to believe West also had ties to the mafia, and was more receptive to the idea of letting gangsters run an illegal gambling racket in the restaurant. Some theories suggest that Roland and some gangsters were waiting for her to come home so they could settle the casino matter. If Thelma had run into West and some of his associates after the party, it would explain why she would be willing to dine and drink with them. But when she wasn't willing to play along with it, perhaps the now heavily intoxicated Thelma was somehow taken up to the garage by one of West's associates, who made it look like an accidental death. Exactly who the gangsters were, and what West's role was in the incident under this theory is totally unknown. If the mob was involved, it would explain why some people close to Thelma and Roland West were unwilling to publicly speak about what happened. Regardless of how Thelma Todd died, one thing is certain: it's truly tragic that such a talented woman died so young, and after all this time, it's still not clear exactly how she died.